You have to do this
Yeah,
one.
do that one.
Yeah, none of this stuff is going up last week. Okay, great. Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Jane Moran. I'm the chair of the Upper Charles Trail Committee, and I want to thank everyone for showing up, people in our audience and people on board with our Google Meet. And I just want to remind everyone that we are being recorded. Okay. So we'll call the meeting to order, which I just did. So I'd like to open up by asking folks if they have questions, comments, or concerns from either Google Meet or from the audience. And I would just like to remind folks to identify yourself with your name and your address before you pose your comment or your question.
Well, would you do that anyway so we could get you recorded in our minutes that you came?
Sure, I'm behind the display here. I'm Amy Groves from 2 College Street.
Thank you, Amy. Do you have a comment or a question?
I do, Sean.
Sure, yeah, go. Yep.
You know, I'll come around because I don't think anybody can.
No, I think that's a great idea. There's a chair right here, Amy.
Okay, all right. It's a big table.
No.
We can stay.
So I've already identified myself, so. So I was not able to attend the select board meeting last night, so more's the pity because I watched some of the replay and I was kind of surprised. There was a lot of talk in the open session at the beginning of the meeting. Some people were asking for a stop work on the design or development of segments 5 and 6. And I want to put myself down on record for supporting that. I know it's an extreme move, but I think that this is warranted at this time. Given the circumstances, we have overwhelming concern that's been expressed by members of the school committee and the public consistently, clearly, and over a long period of time. I don't think we can ignore that. And I understand that we've accepted funds from the state and that it would be embarrassing to all of us in the town to, send funds back. It doesn't usually seem to be feasible. However, the problem is not in refusing the funds. The problem is that the funds were requested in the first place. And for that reason, I believe that this committee from now on should be, when it's making funds requests from the state, when it's applying for monies, this should always be going from now on through the select board and the town manager. Because that's the select board is a committee that gave this committee its charge document. And I would like to see more oversight from the select board, not just presentations given to them, but I would like to see oversight when this committee goes and speaks for the town and requesting money. I want to make sure that the whole town is behind this. So that was be my request. And I have another specific request for your consideration. I was at the senior center at the public meeting some months ago. I can't even remember when it was, but big meeting, really well conducted. I really liked that. But I remember we all filled out this little survey going segment by segment. And this is one of the segments were very finely drawn. We provided all of our input in a very detailed way. I think a lot of people were there. I may have missed something, but I have not seen the data from that survey yet. So if it hasn't been published, I would request that it be published as soon as possible in whatever format you can publish it in, even if it's the raw data, because I think that is of public interest and it should belong to the public. It was submitted during public meeting.
Sure.
So
Somebody to the meeting.
Anyway, thank you for taking my comment.
Okay, sure. Okay, so I think, and I would like to open it up to other members of the committee. It was kind of rapid fire from Amy, so I could ask you to clarify. But the first one I got was a lot of people, how many people were there, do you know?
We're
At the select board meeting that made request, you said there were a lot of people.
I was listening to the first part of it during the open session and the camera recording cut off the speaker. So I don't really have, and some of those people may be here tonight. So I wait for them to speak for themselves, but I did.
Through the chair,
There were 3 people who attended last night. At select board meeting.
I'm sorry, what letter from?
There were 3 people who attended, and provided comment, at the select board meeting.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious. You know, 20,000 people, 3 people showed up, so, okay.
This is open meeting.
It's important. It's not a. Anyway, so I was just curious. That comment and others can jump in too. So the request from at least one of them, it could have been others, that they asked of the select board to have a stop work order on, I believe we're calling it phase 5, which is where we already, I think is it 6? I think it's 6.
There's 2, segment 5 and segment
No,
6.
5? Okay, so,
Well, that's what, I'm repeating what Amy said, so.
oh, so they asked for a stop orders on both 5 and 6? 5 has been complete.
They asked,
Through the chair, I can provide a little more detail on that.
Thank you.
So they were asking that we not expend the funds for segment 6 until we are fully aware of, what the route is going to be and investigate, excuse me, alternative routes for segment 6. And I think they'd also mentioned something about segment 5 as well, that spending money on the engineering when we're not sure that which route we're going to take, should we be spending money on segment 5 if there's going to be an alternate route?
Okay, so thank you for that clarification.
My pleasure.
Is here, Dave Del Terriore, engineer, but, so let me just throw out this. I believe segment 5, engineering, already been completed up to 5%. Okay, so expending of the funds for segment 6, that request went to the state.
that's the math.
That's the Mass Trails Grant, which has already been granted. So that money has already been granted to the town.
Correct. So
Correct.
what they were, I think they were saying not to spend that money on segment 6 until we, basically saying that, we'll be throwing money at something that we're not sure that's where it's going to go. So why are we engineering it if that's not the final route?
Okay, so I think, and I request the committee to jump into this as well. I think some of the thought process is that we don't know segment 6 it's even feasible if we get the engineering done first. So that was the request from the state. This committee voted on. So I'm not sure the select board wants to interfere with town boards and committees. I'm not sure where that would go. The state has already granted us this money. The money is coming. The work has started. I'm not sure, I'm sure the select board could do that.
CPC funded part of it, and town meeting approved the request from CPC at town meeting. So it was.
No.
The line item was withdrawn.
Right,
No,
The total thing
for,
the year before.
for segment 6.
In any event, as a committee member, would probably request a legal representation from legal saying, can the select board then, and I would certainly go along with anything that the select board wanted to do. But if the select board wanted to then force the state to stop work or, whatever it was, I'm not even sure what the language would be. That would be an interesting conversation to have. And maybe there just needs to be more conversation. I don't know. How do I don't, it's an interesting situation come up that we have never had, that I know of, that has ever occurred, but that doesn't mean that the conversation shouldn't continue.
Why don't we just ask the selectmen to have town council give us an opinion?
We could do that.
Well, through the chair, select board hasn't done anything. This was just during public comment period. And we had 3 people come up and request that we direct the Upper Charles Trail Committee not to spend money. The select board hasn't done anything. We just received comments. So I just want to make that clear that there's been no directive, and nor has the board discussed this yet. But that was the request, is that the select board step in. As far as, what we're going to do with the money that's been granted, the select board has delegated authority to the Upper Charles Trails Committee to investigate and find alternatives and options. And I think that's what we're kind of waiting for. The select board will be waiting on direction from the Upper Charles Trail Committee as to which way you want to go and what the proposed options are.
Okay, so I missed the last part. If you could just clarify that last paragraph, before you're waiting for direction, what was the direction that you're asking us to go in?
We're not asking for a direction to go in. So the Upper Charles Trails Committee will be providing options to the select board to consider.
Correct.
We're not directing you which way to go. We were that's one of the things that was asked of us last night. We haven't taken any action on that. So we're waiting for the options that the committee is going to provide to us. Make
Okay,
sense?
so, so we're just, as I've mentioned to the public, we're just not ready to provide options to the select board at this point in time. We feel it's too premature.
Yeah, these requests are for engineering.
They're for engineering studies, and we feel as a committee, we've discussed this for years and years, we can't viably provide an intelligent request of the select board without the background information to go along with it, because we feel the select board was going to say, well, what is your thought process? What is the basis of your analysis for asking us to support this trail or this path or that path without engineering studies? And the path that we've taken before is to request state tip money, because they will pay 75% of the engineering costs. And then, so it's money that the state can do, and that's what we have been doing right along. And it's so far, up until the last year, this has worked for us, and we have received tons of information that has gotten us to the point where we are today. The remaining 25% we request from CPC, and that is then again voted at town meeting. So
There's nothing that obligates us to continue the project past the engineering study. That's why we're doing the study. Then we'll
Correct.
make a decision on what is the best way to approach it.
yeah, because we just don't know what the wetland issues are. We don't know what the boundary issues are. We don't know what the neighborhood issues are. There's so much that goes into this feedback before we feel, in fact, the select board have asked us on numerous occasions, and so has the planning board, and so has the school committee, go back, do your homework, find out what the engineering studies are, find out what the neighborhood issues are, and then come back to us. Don't come back to us before then. They want us to do the groundwork. And so here we are doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Yes,
So the engineering study is to determine the viability of the route. That makes
correct.
perfect sense, makes perfect sense.
Yes. Can just, but so I don't mean to interrupt, but can you just identify yourself? Because there's a lot of folks.
I'm
Sure.
sorry, this is our fun Nasrullah.
Oh, no, I think she meant me.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Oh, sorry. She meant, I don't know if I'm on the camera. Hi. Jamie Bronca, I'm an alternate member. I'm new to the committee. So are we doing engineering studies on more than one option so that we can present options with homework, or is it just one option? I'm
No.
not clear.
Okay, so that's a very good question,
It's-
Jamie.
I tried to find the information I really couldn't. And so I don't,
Through the
Oh.
chair, Jane. Hi, it's Matt.
Oh, hi, Matt. This is Matt Chase, and he can probably answer your question, Jamie, and he's our engineer from VHB.
Yeah, sorry I couldn't be there in person tonight. But so I just wanted to give you kind of an update of the approach that we're taking to get into this, and maybe that helps kind of clarify where we're going with this. So yes, you received the grant. Yes, it's preliminary engineering, and it's more of a feasibility options assessment. So the term preliminary is not committing to construction or final design or anything like that. So we're in the process of putting together a base plan for this whole area that was shown on the graphic with the various alignments at the April meeting. And we're pulling in information, working with Dave on the Marathon School information, wetlands, and other things that are at a higher level of detail than what you currently have for a base plan, which is just simply a desktop review. And so we're going to create this base plan and provide it to you as basically a blank slate of paper and say, probably have some meeting and say, here's our plan. And here's the plan we went to the public in April. Which alignments, 1, 2, 3, we talked about a loop. There's things we need to talk about to say, okay, which way do you want to go? How do you want to review this? And then we're going to evaluate it in greater detail than what we've done now. And that'll dictate the feasibility. So if during this, and I think Dave's been clear the whole way on this process and even going after the grant, that if at the end of this, there's not a consensus as to which way the alignment goes, then no harm done, because you need to do this next step to get answers to figure out what you're going to do next, at least, through this area. So
it's only the things that were presented in the April meeting, no like other options. Because
nope, there could be other options. I mean, there were
not
just
what's being worked on right now. I understand there could be other options, but this is just on the one general direction.
So what's being worked on right now is just a blanketed base plan that'll give you topographic information and wetlands and other details that are at a higher level of accuracy than what you have now. And then that'll be used to review the alignments that have been looked in the past, which I think there's 2, and see if those are still the 2 viable options, or if we need to look at a third or a change or whatever it might be. And then we dive into those details and see what's the feasibility. Are there issues or constraints or other that need to be addressed? Or if they can't be addressed, then that's what we need to find out now before we take the design too far to say a final engineering phase where you would bid it and construct it. So no matter what you do, in my opinion, you have to advance something for this area between segment 5 and these properties through EMC Park and through the properties, the Irving Tadero property, and I don't remember exactly. I know there was some directive, I think, from the select board. I wasn't part of that, but to look at certain parcels in this area to see if a trail was feasible. And so I think that was a separate directive from the committee, but I don't know. I'm trying to put all the pieces together here, but I'm just trying to be kind of open with you and saying, I'm not racing and doing a preliminary engineering plan and saying, this is it, and this is what we're moving forward with. We have to do something to the next level, and using this funding is that opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Matt. That was very helpful. I believe Scott has
Yeah, through the chair, thank you.
something.
I 100% support doing research and getting information
to make educated, decisions and recommendations to the select. 100% agree with that. That's point number one. And so doing engineering work to learn more, I'm supportive of. I think where there might be a disconnect is that we're spending town funds through engineering on a segment that overwhelmingly was objected to, which was the Hayden Road to do the engineering and measuring.
Well,
Well, I'll just go through the list, this three.
three.
We're leveraging, we're relying on, through a subgroup, but we're relying on the work of the Trails Club to do due diligence on the other alternatives. So we're spending funds, whether state or taxpayer or town, directly, indirectly, all of the above, on the route that goes one direction, which they are not options because 5 and 6 aren't trade-offs. They're connectors, right, to each other, versus spending the funds on the other. So my only request and suggestion through the chair would be that we have a level playing field for all the different segments as opposed to just, the town gave us feedback and said, we want you to look at options to Amy's point.
Correct.
And therefore we should equally disperse funds and our efforts on both as opposed to relying on residents of the town to give us input and feedback on the segment the town, at least members of the town have been vocal about versus the segments that we're looking at. So again, I'm supportive of what we're doing, but do that. And then that's point number 2. Then I'll remove myself from the floor. And then point number 3, as I noticed on the agenda here, and it kind of goes against what Matt had said. And I'm not saying Matt made the agenda, Matt, but under working group reports, we have finished segment 5, quote underscore final design and construction. And as Matt said, and that might be a typo, whatever, but as Matt said, they're not looking at any final design or construction. So I think that those items, those elements combined could create confusion amongst the community. Thank you.
Okay, so I think I can answer to your question. I forgot the first one. You're gonna have to remind me of the first one, but I can answer the second and the third, and then we can go back to the first. So, with all due respect to this committee, we started this project 7 or 8 years ago, and one of the first routes we looked at was actually going in back of Charlesview through that whole National Grid property, or it might have been Eversource property, through Dale Colella's property and Churco property. It didn't pan out. Dale Colella told me, no, I
No,
go back in the minutes.
It's okay.
You weren't here.
No, I read
We,
all the documents.
well, like, it's been coming, it comes up time and time again. But the fact remains is that this committee and we did our due diligence. We looked at that path over and over and over again and could not get a clear path. It is upon us to find something different. In the meantime, we were looking at all these other options to go through. So when folks say we haven't done our due diligence, we haven't looked at that, I think that's unfair.
Yeah, who said that?
I'm sorry, who?
I'm sorry.
I'm saying that.
Right, no, but you were looking at me, so I was just
Oh, no, no,
confused.
no.
Like, I don't think I said that.
Question. No, but we did look at that and our committee
On
had
the
to
thing, we
keep,
have to look past you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, since I got here 2 minutes after, I didn't get an agenda or seat, sorry.
so I'm just trying to bring folks up to speed. So it was incumbent upon our committee to keep moving forward and find a path forward. We looked at East Main Street. It's not just Hayden Road. It's Granite Street, it's College Street, it's Hughes property, it's downtown project. It's downtown, it's in back of Center School. This is a huge project.
Yeah.
So for us to get bogged down on this issue, which is one of the ones we first addressed, it's fair for people to bring up again, but I don't think that that people can say that we'd never looked at it because we did. We
Part of
did
that-
actually look at it. And, sure, so, and it's fair to bring it up again if situations have changed, which I understand that some of it may have changed. In fact, we have, one of our committee members who is a liaison with the Trails Club, who has come, who is saying, and so that I think is the beginning of my comment. When you say that we're relying on a private group to do all of this heavy lifting, they pretty much took the path that we originally came up with. And they've tweaked it. Yes, it has been tweaked. Thank you, Peter. It has been tweaked because you have done your due diligence and trying to find a different path. And that is to be respected and encouraged. So yes, to this extent, we do have to keep going on, but I think it's unfair to say that we haven't looked at that.
Okay, excuse me, through the chair. I didn't say we didn't look at it. I said that we should have a level playing field of where we're investing funds to actually do engineering. And all the records that I reviewed show no
Oh,
engineering. for the-
Okay, so
That's
I
all.
don't think that the town will sponsor a private group like the Trails Club. They will, however, fund Peter Lagoy's, who's the chair of the TCMC. And that would be up to the TCMC to request funds, just like we request funds. So that could be done through the TCMC if they wanted to request funds. So I don't, if I'm not misunderstanding
Sorry,
you.
I don't want to take too much of the time. I'm just want to clarify my points, and I don't need to debate. I heard your point saying that the committee has already looked at that and ruled that out. That's what I heard you say, that route.
5 years ago, we ruled it out because we could
So
not.
you're looking for other alternatives. So that is new to me, that is not an option. The second point that I want to clarify for me is I'm suggesting that the committee should entertain investing engineering funds, just like we're engineering funds for the other segments, to those segments instead of relying on private people to walk the land. That's all.
Okay, point
That's my only
taken.
point. Thank you.
The third one was the agenda item was written, oh, we had to cancel the month before. It was, the meeting before. So the agenda item was written after the last meeting when Matt was able to be here. And this committee had asked him to bring an update in regards to behind the marathon school. So that's what that agenda item was. We were not able to have a conversation the last time because we didn't have a meeting. We couldn't have a meeting. So the agenda carried forth. And so I think Matt and Dave can clarify that if we ever get to agenda number 1, okay? So it's hopefully not confusing to people because hopefully that was going to be the comment. Okay, from other committee members before, yes, Ken?
It was my impression that although we considered the Western option, we didn't rule it out. We just faced some barriers. And so we decided to see if we had faced similar barriers by going on alternative routes, but we never ruled out the Western option. We have private landowner issues and still do, but.
And I think to your point, Ken, that's a valid point. And then that's why it wasn't ruled out when we did this overall map. And that Western alternative was included.
Right, so
remember.
I just want to emphasize it was not ruled out.
No, but we couldn't get past those obstacles, so we had to look at other choices.
Looked at other choices, but
Yeah.
I always thought it would be possible that we'd have to go back to the Western option if we faced obstacles elsewhere.
And that could be the case.
Right.
That could be the case. Okay, so anyone else from the audience that would like to,
Excuse me, there's 2 raised hands, it looks like. There was, or maybe not, sorry.
I have a raised hand, Madam
Okay.
Chair. And I know that Irfan did as well.
yes, go ahead.
Muriel Kramer, 39 North Street, speaking as a private citizen. I guess I just want to elevate the question that your committee member Scott raised. If it is your process to use state and town funds to do preliminary engineering work on portions of the trail, I think that it's a reasonable question from the public and from your committee members that the western portion gets the same kind of preliminary engineering study work, so that you are really looking at all the alternatives at the same time.
Thank you, and I think you're gonna see that on the agenda, the upcoming agenda, because we have not ruled that out at all. And Irfan, go ahead.
Yes, so I just had one question. It was actually directed towards Matt. When he said that we were, we're doing the engineering study, is the engineering study going to look at all options, or just for that one route? I thought I heard him say that it's for all options for that segment. So I just want a little clarification on that.
Sure. There are two options, I think, that were presented at the April public meeting. One was a loop, and then one kind of was a terminus to a town-owned property. So I think we would look at both of those or another alternative as deemed by the group, by the committee. And then there's additional engineering you can do to build on part of that, like running an actual designing an actual wide path and figuring out more detailed impacts or showing the profile changes. Like that unless it was needed, I don't think we would look at all options like that. We'd pick maybe a preferred option and do that, and maybe we do it for all. I guess it just depends on how many different options there are. But yes, we wouldn't just, at the end of this, we could have two alignment options that are undecided and need to go wherever, public meeting, select board, wherever it needs to go. Like that's the goal of this, is to provide more information to a higher level where the town has some control of property, where there's no roadblocks, that something can be further engineered so that the impacts can be better identified.
Thank you.
Sure. So, Dave Del Torrio, our town engineer.
Just to add on to that, just to be clear, the goal of VHB's initial work through the Mass Trails grant is to gather base plan information, to develop a plan, meaning a piece of paper plan, not a plan for the trails, to bring to the committee, who will look at it and we'll be able to tell you from an engineering standpoint, what areas are wetlands, what areas are rock outcrops, what areas are vernal pools, or whatever. And I'm also trying to coordinate with, the school project. They won't have their feasibility study done until January or February. They won't know what parcel the school's gonna go on. So that comes into play for the committee when we sit down with you and you decide what options, how many options, what looks feasible, what doesn't look feasible. During that workshop or that meeting, you ask the engineers, you ask VHB engineering questions, construction questions, environmental questions. What route's easier? What route's harder? We like this, we like that. Can you evaluate this? So it's kind of a working process. The plans shown to date on segment 6 were simply, I took a pen and drew a line on the paper because there's been no previous studies, there's been no evaluations. How do you identify? It's just, I went around the border of the two properties, only to show that these are the two properties we're talking about as segment 6. The town, when we purchased the properties, part of that purchase was to develop trails, as well as other municipal uses. And I think that's a fact that can't be lost here. When the town purchased it, town meeting said, we want to buy these for all sorts of uses, school uses, municipal uses. We want to evaluate trails. So part of that is meeting that checkbox from the original town meeting article as well. So I just want to make sure it's clear that Matt and I aren't going to sit down and pick options. You folks are. That's the committee's task.
I think I would just like to add one more thing. When we have applied for these state tip fundings over the past years, we're limited. There's a cap.
Mass Trails.
Mass Trails. We don't want to go mass tips yet. Mass Trails, there is a cap on how much we can apply for. So the history has been that we've been limited on how much engineering we can actually ask for. And so that has kind of evolved into breaking up of segments that you see in our overall concept. Because we would, although we would love to apply for massed, tip for the overall thing, that it's like a state, it's like a school project, and we would be in the queue for 7, 8, 10 years.
The tip is for construction funds.
And it's, yeah, it's a lot more involved. But when we apply for the Mass Trails Grant, we can get a glimpse into what we are going to encounter. Are there wetlands issues? Are there neighborhood issues? Are there all these other things that we're trying to resolve or get a better handle on so that we can go on to the next step? So.
Okay, sounds good.
Anyone else from the, Peter, yes, can you identify yourself?
Yes.
Sure, have a seat in the big chair.
Yeah, Peter LaGoy, 21 Hayden Rose Street, speaking as a private citizen and as the constructor of both the Hughes Trail, which was a trail that went through farmland across some farm property, a old cart road, and then through the woods. And also I was the one who constructed the trail that went, we call it Center Trail Phase 2, from the Loop Road to the Chamberlain Street. In both cases, what was done is, I think, equivalent to what you're doing, but it was done by me, Robert Weideneck, who has considerable trail experience as a trail engineer, or was, he's retired, and a wetlands person, and simply walking the site. It is not rocket scientist to do this. You do not need $100,000 to determine what viable route or routes are. Some of my concern is we're spending an awful lot of engineering, preliminary engineering funding on something that can be done in half a day with people who are fairly knowledgeable. And it's determining where there's wetlands issues is really not complicated. Determining where vernal pools are, again, not that complicated. We have volunteers in town, but certainly I'm sure VHB has professionals who could walk that trail with Dave and in a day come back with a nice map that these folks could then determine what a route might be. So I would make that point that from experience, this is not a complicated process. Putting together $100,000 type report is kind of not doing the town a good service. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Anyone else? Yes, Chuck, would you come up and identify yourself, please?
Chuck Dodgy, 25 Sanctuary Lane, a member of the Trails Club. And I have been involved in the evaluation of the potential so-called western route around the Charlesview development to the west. And I know that technically that is feasible. I'm a retired wetlands consultant and also have been involved in stormwater management design and subdivision and roadway design. But my concern, speaking as an individual and taxpayer, is that these funds for a section of trail that may or may not be needed because of the questions of difficulty on the route down Hayden Road, based on the town's recent survey results. I suggest that it makes much more sense to apply the engineering and design and evaluation funds to sections where there is very likely common agreement, that being either from the Hughes property to Granite Street, where there's a route that does have wetlands, needs considerable evaluation and design consideration, or the route from, East Main to the state park, which is another key section, and which, if that were done and even stood alone, would be a great asset to the town. So again, I suggest and I recommend it to the select board, that, if any way possible, the funds that are now to be used for phase 6 can be used for evaluation of these more viable and certain alternatives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. I think I can answer that quickly. The funds that you're requesting that they go back for further studying to East Main Street to Hopkinton State Park or Granite Street are from the state, and it's very specific. We can't rewrite that grant. That grant, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt or Dave, but the money that was granted to us for phase 6 has to be spent for phase 6 or it's lost. End of story. The second response that I would have to Peter's comment is that, and I am very grateful for all of the work that you've done through Hughes and Center Trail Phase 2. It's wonderful and the town benefits from it and it's fantastic work. However, those are pretty much level and there's not much wetland issues. When you get over, as Chuck mentioned, to Granite Street area, to College Street area, there are huge wetlands issues that need to be evaluated by state and probably the DEP. Huge funding. And this committee has to consider that. The second piece is when you look at the pieces, the other pieces that have huge elevation issues, we have to consider all kinds of things because if we want to have these trails that are all inclusive and include handicapped people and people that are challenged and all kinds of things, we have to consider that. It's not just a dirt path through the woods. We have to qualify. And you're right. And I would also like to add as a caveat, and then I'd like to move on. And you know this better than anyone because you're a member of the Trails Club. Last time I counted, between Halt and the Trails Club, we have over 135 miles. Or correct me if it could be wrong, but there's a lot of mileage in there of trails that folks that are able-bodied and that are interested in cross-country running and all of that good stuff that have accessibility. What this committee has been charged with, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is coming from the select board, is that we have a trail that includes and is all-inclusive of all citizens in our community and all of Hopkinton. And so we have to include, we have a tougher job. So anyway, is there anyone else from the general public that would like
Jane,
to speak?
through the chair, Jane, this
Yes,
is Matt
Matt.
again. I also wanted to just advise that I don't remember the exact date of the meeting, but I remember the fire chief attended one of the meetings and you had a conversation with him about what his desired path would look like and for accessibility. And I know he had some specific guidelines that he wanted to see, especially for these paths that kind of go off way, off of the main line and into the woods. So I don't know exactly when that was. I know he was happy to be part of the conversation and wanted to be part of the conversation as things advanced. But I think that also plays into a lot of how you design some of this and how you set your alignments.
Correct. We've had multiple meetings where we've invited the fire chief and the police chief and, all kinds of folks to come and give us input. So that when we design these, we can not only afford accessibility for all of our almost 20,000 citizens now in town, but also that we're meeting the guidelines so that we can get the funding for the state and federal guidelines. And all of this preliminary work that we're doing for the engineering speaks to that because correct me if I'm wrong, but if before you go for state tip funding, you have to meet preliminary guidelines already.
Well, yeah, the tip process is a whole animal.
It's a whole other animal.
You have to design to their. As for reassigning grant funds, well, I've never heard of it, but I'll ask the state so that we can get an answer from them directly in the email form.
Thank you.
I think that's all right, go ahead and ask, but I think we've heard that we can't do it, but go ahead. Reassign, put that on the agenda.
What's next on the agenda?
All right. So now update on VHB engineering progress report, the first one.
Heard something? You guys have, I thought I heard something. So
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only comment I had was that, in any planning that the Trails Club has done, we've been very well aware of accessibility standards in terms of grade. And have looked at LiDAR topo and walked areas with a kilometer, which I'm not sure that your engineers have always done. And verified that there are feasible routes. Obviously, some grading is necessary, but that is just to let you know that that is something that obviously needs further investigation. But
Absolutely.
please do not dismiss it out of hand, because many of our trails are class 3.
And please don't misunderstand me. That's not what I was saying at all.
Okay.
I think that I was just trying to say that we're just two different animals. Okay, so moving on to, I don't know who wants to go first, Dave or Matt?
Well, for 3A, the scheduling for this is the Mass Trails grant work. I think we've kind of touched on where we are. We're still gathering preliminary information. Develop a plan to bring to you folks.
Okay, report on the engineering schedule with the EMC Park through the Marathon School Path section. That was an update request. I think that we were just waiting, and I think you touched on that we were waiting for the school committee's report back and that we really couldn't do much until we want to wait for their input before we move forward.
Well, we're gathering information on the entire properties, the existing conditions plan.
Okay.
Call it. We are aware of the school committee's feasibility study.
Thank
That
you.
feasibility study is not going to be completed until January or February for the school building committee.
Okay, so there was two pieces. Thank you.
And, any coordination between, any possible eventual school project in that property would obviously be coordinated with the building committee and this committee. And the
Building committee, school committee, and Upper Charles Trail. Okay, good. Matt, do you have, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think I echo what Dave stated. And I think I mentioned a little bit of this earlier on. I was hoping to have a date today as to when I would have that plan, but I don't. So I'll have to, rather than say it'll be another week or two, I'll have to, Jane, I can email you as soon as I know, and then we can see how it fits into the next agenda.
Okay, so we'll try and craft the next agenda so there's not so much confusion. That would be good. Because I did hear you that there was some confusion, and that's not good. Okay, so 3B, segment East Main approach toward Hopkinton State Park in regards to preliminary design costs as a possible request to CPC 24 funding. And I think this ties into how much, if we could get the Mass Trails grant for some of that as well. And I think, Matt, you were going to provide some of that.
So I think, Jane, through you, through the chair, that was the handout that I had for the last meeting, and then it seems the meeting didn't have a quorum, or there's some, I don't know if the handouts are still there in front of you, or you have them, or.
No, I don't know if we ever got them. If I did, I don't remember.
I think they were printed and I think on the table for the time. I couldn't make that meeting in person, but I have that information that I can either email with you or however you want to do that. But the request that last time we met was to go after CPC funds and get in there for segment 5 final engineering funding and or construction costs. And then segment 1 was to see what would be the approach and the next steps to advance that project to consider TIP funding.
Okay, got it.
And so what I outlined was it was a 2-step process for each. So the segment 5 final design for that was for segment 5, there was there's still final engineering and permitting and an NOI and structural design. There's a boardwalk and a little bridge crossing, and all that needs to be finalized, and bid documents and construction phase services. And so that was in that table.
Okay.
And then there was a segment 5 construction costs, and we went through and updated the construction costs for this year because we saw a cost escalation. And so those were adjusted. And then I think last year we had discussions about adding additional contingencies both on the design and for construction for any unknowns, because we don't know when really this is going to get moved along, or when it would be bid, or what the climate is for bidding.
Okay.
So those were broken out into 2 pots. And in that sheet, and I don't know if do you have a time frame for CPC? I thought it was soon or had passed, but
I think they would like an idea.
okay. So
But I think this committee has to decide which, if any, because my understanding is if we go after a state trails fund, the Mass Trails grant, we can only do one.
the
And
Mass,
we do-
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Mass Trails.
You have to close out this grant first before you can go after the next one. So the grant opens up, I believe, in February. Gets
Okay.
awarded in July. And so you essentially would have to complete this and close this out by probably December or January to be
Okay.
in the running for the next round of Mass Trails. That said, this past Mass Trails grant, there was an opening, I think in February, and then I think they reopened it, I think in April, but don't quote me on that date. But they opened it up again because they had low responses the first time around. So, and I think there is the potential to seek, let's say you can get $300,000 from Mass Trails and you requested 100 and whatever it is, 15 or whatever it was, this 12 for this round, you can seek for the balance to get the 300. But I think Dave had a conversation with the grant coordinator, and it's competitive. It's, prioritize. If you already have money out there, then there might be somebody who's has a higher priority than you because you haven't closed yours out. So, there's options. And I think, Dave, is this correct that she said if you wanted to, you could submit if you had the resources to do so, but it's just a lower ranking, and you may not be as the desirable application for someone who doesn't have a grant outstanding and who is seeking a grant for the first time. Again, it's all based on how many people pursue it the first time, or when it opens up. And this past year, not a lot of people did, so they still had money on the table, and that's why they opened it up again. So I'm not saying you can't submit, but you run your risks, and your percentages kind of go down a little bit if you do submit and have an open grant.
Okay, so my take, 30-second version is we don't have a really good chance of applying for the Mass Trails grant this year. We have to kind of hold off, finish out this grant with, segment 6. And so I guess I can jump forward. So that's,
To the chair.
sure.
I feel bad about saying this on the heels of Matt's comment, sorry. But it's really with the intent of trying to, understand how much we might go to the CPC for if this were something. So in that vein, Matt.
Yeah.
But do we, or have we recently or ever gone out and gotten like 2 bids for quotes? And this is kind of going back to Peter LaGoy's comment. In his opinion, it's an exorbitant fee to pay. Do we do that? Do we ever go? And since every trail is sort of an independent segment, one would think you can get 2 bids just to, just to verify that the amount that's
Sure.
being bid, quoted is somewhat reasonable and fair to the taxpayers.
So and when you say bids, are you talking construction or?
No, I'm saying for
Design?
work. Yeah,
Design
so
work?
the
Yeah.
question, the question's to Jane more like, have we, as a committee,
Yep.
have we or would we entertain considering getting a second quote from another engineering firm
We
for
actually
a similar
have.
project? We have recently?
We have, well, I don't know how recent it was, but when did we go out for bids for what part of?
Dave,
we
you just
did
did it for,
something.
you just did it for Hayden Row, right?
Well, that was town funds, not.
Well, right, I
We've been out
understand.
surveying, we've been out the surveying of Hayden Row.
No, we,
The 3 different engineering firms.
yeah,
Did you, go
no,
out
there
for-
was, there was one before that.
Did you do an RFP for?
Yes, we did an RFP. I
You
don't
did an
remember
RFP
which
for
one it
segment,
was.
for
We
segment
did, and
5.
it went out to VHB, it went out, and only 2
you hear what he
companies
said?
responded.
get the grant, you have to bid that out.
Okay, so maybe Elaine is a better person.
Okay, so we did for, so we would do that again for this segment 1, for an example. We would take a second. Okay, thank you. That is my question.
We have to do it. I
Yep.
mean, the state requires it.
Yep, just again.
So-
And we
I-
have done it, I
Anybody.
just can't remember when it was.
And I just would advise the committee that if you put something out the bid, you have to be very clear on the design standards that you need to meet. That's all. Because there's a couple different ways to go about a design approach, right? But if you meet the state and federal guidelines for, say, a tip project, then that design process and fee is a lot different than if you just did something locally in-house. The design process is very different.
Good question.
Okay, good.
Okay,
So anyway, so I'm sorry, I on 3B,
go
I
right
know-
ahead.
I know I talked about segment 5, but then segment 1, in that same summary that I provided, there was a 2-step process to do a project development phase, and then to do a 10% type design, which would get you to DOT. And I broke it out in those 2 steps because at either one of those times, you could change direction and decide not to go for tip money if you decided to go for CPC money. So I didn't want to lock you in and say, this is going to take you to DOT 100%. Like, I wanted to get you to a certain point where you can make a decision to say, okay, we're going to design this a little differently and we're not going to go through tip funding and we want to meet these requirements and this is what we're going to do. And now's the time to make that decision. So it was a 2-step process that was laid out for the committee to consider.
Would it be possible if I sent that to a printer upstairs and they can?
Yeah, that would might be nice.
I can share my screen if that helps. I don't know if you
I
want
don't
me to
know.
do that or not, or.
Let's share his screen.
Yeah.
We need that.
Yeah, because we wanted to talk about if there was an opportunity for segment 1, which is Hopkinton State Park to East Main Street. Would there be an opportunity for the committee to consider requesting CPC to use some funding for that piece, either for a project development or for design costs? And Matt, I know this is going to be out of left field, but is also there an opportunity to break up segment 1 into segment A and segment B? In other words, could we
Yes.
start at East Main Street and go up to Legacy Farms? That could be like segment B. And then segment A could be from Hopkinton State Park to Legacy Farms,
Yes,
depending on how much money we think that CPC would allow us to do that.
correct. Yes. And I think the way I the way I did this, because I did 2 steps rather than probably 4 or 6 steps.
Right.
You can. My suggestion would be, and it's up to you how you want to do it. I think if you're evaluating the full connection and going into the Hopkinton State Park, evaluating that second phase and that second section is probably good to look at it as a whole, and then take a step back and say, okay, we can hit Legacy Farms, which ties us that they built, and then we'll build this section. And then you know what? But we need to get more information to go meet with DCR so that you can have a conversation with them about how you want to navigate through their property. Without that information, they're just a line on the plan on an aerial, and I don't think that gives them enough information to make any decisions. You could hear maybe that there's some challenges to get into DCR, into the park, and they may want to see certain things, so you can pull that piece out certainly at any time. And then you could approach it by designing the lower part of it, or 1A from Legacy Farms down to East Main Street. So there is an option. The way I have it here takes you all the way into the park. But I think that first step, the project development phase, I would say look at it as a whole. And then if you wanted to change gears, then the second phase to that, you could abbreviate it. I think there's some value if you go to a tip to include the connection to the state park if DCR supports it. It gives it more of a high profile type project that has more state support and could move you up on the list if there was available funding on the tip. It's just a leverage and a piece that I think if you talk to people who look at these trails, they're always looking for regional connectivity, and they want to try to provide the best opportunity to make connections from town to town, region to region. And I think connecting to DCR would give you that check the box. I think Amanda Lewis would advise on this as well. And she mentioned it to Dave, I'm not sure, but I had a conversation with her this past summer, and that's how they look at it. What's the regional connection? Does it connect to something that has a regional significance? Is it a local connection? And I think that's how they prioritize funding and look at funding. I think the tip would look at that the same way. If it's a CPC in-house project and it's not going through DCR, then it's a local project. Then I think this is where you would shift directions and say, okay, the 10% design might be your preliminary design, and then you would decide what to do after that. I've said this before, the Mass DOT design process is very complicated. It's like a 5-6 step design process. And if we did something with the town, it could be like a 2-step, kind of like what we're talking about with segment 5 now for final. It'd go preliminary and final, not the 10%, 25, 75, 100, PS&E, 1, 2, and then bid.
Right.
So it's you want the state and federal dollars, you have to jump through the state and federal hoops to get all the funding in order and check those boxes. And it is a process.
So if we're looking at the upper right-hand box, it says segment 1, preliminary design, Mass DOT tip, this would kind of set the stage so that we could then go forward later and apply for and meet their qualifications. If we, submitted to the CPC this 48,400 to CPC to do this preliminary work that's in this box above. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that would give you the option to say, do I want to go to the first design submission to Mass DOT, and that would be 10%. So do I want to do that, or do I want to use CPC funds and go right to preliminary engineering? Because, we might find that there's not a lot of structural or bridges or boardwalks in this section. I know there's a lot of existing paths through this segment that we could build upon. And the question is the width, it's the horse track, the trail adjacent to it. It's some of those things that we have to figure out, and that would be figured out in this first phase. And if there's no significant, design trapdoors like structural or hydraulic assessments that DOT would require, maybe you say this is an easy project that can be funded locally through CPC, and I don't need to go through the TIP process. And I think that's what we learned on segment 5, is that was originally going to go to TIP, but then when we got to the end of it, we said, okay, well, look, it's $1 million. So to go through the Mass DOT process is just a lengthy process, and it's more timing and time consuming and more costly than it is to just go right to final engineering from here. So I think there hasn't been a decision made yet to take that from the tip, because you still have a project manager from Mass DOT. But the thought, I believe, was to get through some of these reviews of these alternatives, and at some point make a decision: is segment 1 going to swap out with segment 5, and then approach DOT to see how that would work? Because I think DOT, if you went with 2, they'll say you need to get the first one to a milestone and then go from there. And I think, Dave, there's a letter that I think the town received for segment 5 that has an outline of how that design is supposed to be approached, and there's some time frames to that, like 2, 3, 4, 5 years or something like that. So, I don't know if the clock's going to expire soon. I haven't put a date on it, but I would say that at some point next year, you'll want to have to make a decision of, do we notify DOT that we're pulling segment 5 from the Mass DOT tip and we're exploring segment 1 or another segment? I think at one point we also talked about, did it make sense to go to the center school as well and go all the way? But I know there's some challenges up there with property ownership and other things that need to get ironed out for that alignment. So there's more value if you're asking for a bigger dollar amount for construction for Mass DOT and the design process, if the design process is not overly complicated or requires a lot of design. So I think at one point we thought it was 5 or 6 or 7 million, I think, for that whole from center school up to DCR, and that is a great sized project for the region that you're in the MPO. Whereas segment 5 is like $1 million or $1.5 million, or however the bid prices fall, and that's definitely the smaller scale project that I think that the percentage of design versus the construction cost is a little off there, just because it is you still have to follow the process. You can't skip any submissions.
Right, we can't skip yes.
Excuse me. Thanks. Yeah, a lot of good information, Matt. So I'm trying to connect the dots, and maybe they don't connect. So maybe this goes to Dave. But the comment earlier made about waiting on a school committee feasibility report versus the timing here on the final design and research, is that linear, or is that, does those have to happen in sequence? Do they happen in parallel? Because I'm kind of tying it back to Matt's comment about, by a certain point of next year, we need to let Mass DOT know whether it's in or out. Does that all make sense? My comments make sense? So I'm trying to figure
Or do something else.
Right. So what I'm
It
trying to,
doesn't necessarily mean out, correct me if I'm
no,
wrong,
well,
but
let me
we
restate my
choose
question.
something
So
else.
I had to think it through verbally, sorry. So out loud. So my question is, do we have to have the feasibility report either before we do finish the final design, or B, certainly before the construction? Is that a gating factor to one or both of those?
For which segment?
Yeah.
For 5.
Oh,
For 5?
Oh, we were
5
talking
now
more.
is-
Oh, sorry, maybe my eyes were on the left and you guys were on the right.
Five is the one we,
So I can reserve that for later, or if I already disrupted, you can continue. Sorry about that.
no, 5 was the one that we started the TIP process with. 5 goes from Loop Road to Hayden Road.
Right.
Right now that got through 75%, about 75% design, of the Mass DOT design process.
Cool, which is the top box. So we're kind of 75% through the
Top left.
body of work, top left.
well, no, hold on. I think I have to correct you, Dave, but just so I understand.
Okay.
Segment 5 has been designed to a 25% design level. We made a submission. We made
Remember, I'll 25% of a Mass DOT design.
correct. So yeah,
It's about 75% of a normal.
yeah, which is somewhere between 50 and 75% in a traditional design process. Yeah, sorry. That's yep.
So, so segment 5, I think, was what we started the project review process on, which is to get any kind of project into the state process.
Got it.
And I do think Matt's correct. I forget the timing myself. You need to make progress on those, or they just fall off. to listen at.
Right, and I guess maybe that was key, I was keying up that part of his comment, which triggered the brain.
That's
So
fine.
that one's got nothing to do with the school.
Okay.
The feasibility study going on right now.
Okay.
The schools are doing.
Okay, thank you. That was a question.
Separate.
Yep, that's what I thought, but just,
No, it's good. It's good. There's so much information going around
Yep.
right now, so that I appreciate your requesting that clarification. So if we could jump back to segment 1 in the top right-hand box. Would the committee be comfortable in, correct me if I'm wrong, but requesting CPC funding for the 48,400 for this preliminary design from East Main Street to Hopkinton State Park? Just this very preliminary design for engineering.
I think, CPC would, look at it, as part of what they do.
Mhm.
So, and then the amounts aren't outrageous. They provided almost twice that much for segment 5.
Correct. Or does the committee want, looking at this whole chart, would the committee like to talk about requesting other funding? Because Matt, you've done a really good job here providing us with these choices, and thank you, Elaine, for getting them printed out on the run here. Because I think it makes it easy for the committee members to look at this. What other thoughts do the committee members have about, because I think that's what, I think it's next item on our agenda is what are we gonna do about CPC funding here? What is going to be our request? Go ahead.
through the chair, yeah, I'd request that we focus maybe on one segment at a time in the discussion here.
Correct.
So with that, I would also support the request for 48,000 for segment 1. I think the community is voiced in favor of it, and I think it would be beneficial.
CPC is meeting tomorrow night.
Okay.
I will alert them that we, will come with a request for another segment of the trail. I'm not gonna get into jumping through hoops. I'm just going to alert them that, we're in the $50,000 range.
Okay, thank you. And how do the other committees members feel about that? Ken?
I'm in favor of the 48.4. I hope that means that on the ground, it'll be marked where a proposed trail might go, with that amount of money.
Make sure that that's.
I think that would be a question for Matt. Did you
Yeah, I
hear
mean-
his question, Matt?
I did, yeah. We, yes, I think, it would be a similar process to what we did for segment 5, where we actually put stakes in the ground with orange ribbon to delineate where, and again, I will say, it'll be the center line of survey or the location of where a path will be considered. It's not the, it's not the center line. So, and for instance, I'll use an example. So a lot of times when we do these paths in the woods, there's existing foot trails and paths that a trail's already established, but we don't want to put the stakes in the middle of the path, so we put them off to the side because otherwise they get knocked over, broken, taken out, or what have you from bikes or whatever else.
I'm not concerned about that level of,
Yep. But so we would set that, and then like in segment 5, we did our survey, and then somewhere between that survey swath, like a 40-foot survey or so, that's where the alignment would be. So I think that would be the same approach here. We would take that and put it on plan and put it in the field, and then that just will establish kind of what happens after that. Like, where do you go and what's the next step, connections and all.
And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, it would be similar to what we did from the Center Trail through to McDermott.
yeah.
And we
Yes.
worked with Halt. We
Yes,
worked with the Trails
exactly.
Club, and we worked with various groups. Okay. Any other committee members have a thought about the numbers on this chart?
This does go from East Main Street to the state park, right?
Oh.
Not just halfway.
Yeah, and I'm looking at that number and thinking it's really low, but that's what you're saying, Matt, right? It would go all the way to the state park?
What is
So, I mean,
On mute. Matt, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yes, the LiDAR survey is generally available online. We pull it. It's a
Okay.
2 foot contour. In some instances, it's acceptable to use that for some level of design, unless there's areas you need to get ground survey. It's not acceptable for Mass DOT. So that's where segment 1, 10% design based on the LiDAR and the alignment, we would go out and survey to a higher level. And again, it's the higher, it'd be 1 foot contours, and the more detailed survey you get, the less risk you have during construction for any, issues that might come up.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Better bring your weed whacker. There's a lot of weeds up there. Okay, so do I have if there's no further discussion, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second, Scott, second. All in favor? Aye. So the motion is that we're going to go forward and request the 48-4 through CPC funding.
One of your members is remote or fund, so you need to have a roll call vote.
Oh, okay, so we need to have a remote, okay, roll call vote. All in favor, you're muted, Irfan.
I think I'm on. Irfan, that's really yes.
Okay, Jane is yes. Eric,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jamie? Oh, no,
She
you
doesn't.
can. I don't think I can.
Ken, yes.
Yes.
Eli,
Yes.
Scott, okay. Is that good? Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so moving on. I think we're now on to follow up on public outreach, continued discussion, and this would be in Scott's.
We'd be happy, I think, 'cause it's been a long meeting, so not much of an update right now. But to the group members in the room, I gave you a larger font for people's request version. And I just asked that for the folks on the phone, I created a list of all the groups and neighborhoods, et cetera, within town. And the objective is to meet them where they are, public outreach, meet with them to make sure that they're familiar with what's going on, and then form kind of rules of engagement with each group. And there's, I guess there's about 20 different groups across town. So I asked that the members of the committee and anybody in the community take a look at that list. Let me know if the list is complete in your view. And if anybody on the committee or otherwise knows any members or any of those particular groups, let me know. And then what I'll do at that point is I'll come back and formulate a plan of approach, as well as the second bullet point item here, which is I'm in the process of drafting really literally a 3 PowerPoint slide. Keep it very simple for the initial meeting with each of the groups. It's going to be the same slide deck that we'll use for each of the groups. So I'll circulate that to this team probably in the next week or so
Okay,
for feedback. And then we could finalize that as a group. Everybody can agree with that approach. And then I'll also, at the next meeting, can discuss the engagement plan.
okay.
Okay.
So, if I'm hearing correctly, you would like the committee members to maybe email you individually with names for contact names?
Sure. Or that you can fill out the form that
Or
you
you
have in
can-
front of you and hand it to me. Like
Unlike
Eric
the
already did.
rest of you, I've already filled out.
He has.
Oh,
We won't tell you that he only put one name down, but I did.
right, okay.
Well, that name can make something happen.
Okay, well, that's important. So anyways, thank you, Eric and others. So yes, please do that. And then
Do you have
I'll collate them.
Maybe we can
I do.
share with some of the people who are in the audience.
one?
Yes, sure, Jamie.
Jamie.
What are these?
No, he was
No,
gonna
he's good.
hand them out.
Oh,
That would be great, because I think some of our audience members would.
And Elaine, I could send you a soft copy so we can put the list on the website.
That would be great. They might have some. Okay, so moving on, I believe, so thank you, Scott. That's great work. We really appreciate it. This All the good stuff can happen from this. Follow up on the western approach, and that would be Eli.
Eric and I are on the subcommittee to review the Western alternative. He and I met with Peter several weeks ago, and then I met with Peter separately to go over some details. At the risk of oversimplification, the plan differs from the Upper Charles plan in that it anticipates a bridge somewhere south of College Street to connect the parking lot to the western side of Hayden Row and then stay on the western side of Hayden Row. So the Trails Code plan or the Western Alternative Plan doesn't anticipate numerous crossings of Hayden Row. Peter was very good about explaining his plan. There are some unresolved issues, and I'm proposing that the committee let Peter continue his work for the moment because he's not holding us up in any way. And it's best if he is allowed to finish the work. Let me just briefly explain the open issues. There are a few land transfers that have to take place, and he's had positive feedback from the people involved. And ultimately, these transfers will have to be approved by the select board. Secondly, there's a easement required on a piece of land that's central to the plan. And one of the members of the family, there's been a death in the family. And so Peter is holding off working with them, but he's told me he's had positive feedback from them up till now. The bridge is a key element of the plan. The TCMC has been approved, has $5,000 approved to do a engineering study, and Peter is trying to develop a contract with an engineering firm. We need to have, in my opinion, a sense of the bridge's profile on the ground so we can evaluate its impact on the community and abutters and different property owners. The bridge as proposed is in the town of Milford. Peter has not been in contact with the Milford establishment. He has talked to a gentleman who is now retired but was influential in trail design in the past, and he's for it. But again, there's been no contact with the official town people. So in closing, I'm recommending to the committee that we allow Peter to continue working and that wait until all the results are in before we render any conclusion about the viability of this alternative.
I second that as
Okay, thank you.
being his.
Good
Here,
information.
may I ask a
Scott.
clarifying question? Eli, thank you for that. Eli, is the $5,000 engineering for the bridge or for the entire route?
Bridge.
For the bridge.
For the bridge, thank you. Okay. Would that, when you say, maybe we could talk to Peter, I suppose, but when you say let Peter do his thing, you're talking about just the bridge?
No.
Oh, you're talking about investigating with other property owners. Okay, so is there, in your view, maybe it's too early, but in your view, is there a need? Or is there a timing when doing an assessment, the engineering assessment, as we discussed earlier in this meeting, would make sense, or? Clearly, until the property owners,
Control the land.
100%, yeah. But do you think that is something that, Yeah.
I think that Peter should be allowed to continue his work before we reach any conclusions.
or next steps? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Yep. Sounds good.
Ken's next.
Yeah, my question is to Eli effectively, or Peter, is, I mean, Eli mostly talked about the bridge in the southern part of the path, perhaps, I'm not sure. I just wanted clarification as to whether what was under discussion were both western alternatives, so meaning north of Hughes to the Center's Trail and also south of Hughes from basically at the Echo Trail to the Milford Town line. Were both those part of this discussion or just the southern part? Both. Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Any other questions for Eli?
Yeah, if it's on the west side of Hayden Road, it's Peter. That.
Okay.
Junction.
Any other
What's next?
questions? Or comments? Okay,
You want my
Thank you.
liaison report?
yes, liaison reports.
I haven't talked to Norman about us since the last liaison report, so he's still on board, and Elaine is able person that keeps him advised. CPC tomorrow night, we're taking our first look at all the requests for this year. And we're sort of unique in that most of our requests have to do with land purchases or easements or those kinds of things, which we don't have authority to negotiate. They're negotiated by the town manager. And there are several pieces that could affect us that are being negotiated. Mezzo property, for example, and
Others.
others and what have you. So we get sort of a special blessing to come in late when our stuff happens. We're probably the last ones to get closed out of the process. So as long as we have communication with them, and we have two members of this committee on CPC, myself and Jim Cirillo. So we're well represented. That's what I have.
That's good information. Any comments or questions for Eric? Okay, so everyone has a copy. Moving on to the copy of the minutes. Seems so long ago now. From September 21.
Make a motion, we approve as written.
These went out.
Excuse me, I have a little feedback.
Sure.
So when Dave gave his update on the engineering progress, granted it was a long update and we want to capture just the salient points. So I think there's a couple of salient points that were not here. One,
Can you,
sorry,
Three.
specifically on number 3, under the
Okay, thank
update on
you.
engineering progress. Sorry.
No worries.
Reading my notes, but not giving context. Thanks. So in terms of the update on the engineering progress in Hayden Row, I think there's kind of 2 points that need to be mentioned, and I can't remember verbatim, but I checked because I wrote it down in my notes. One is that Dave, you had mentioned that the measurements weren't were I think you said maybe every couple hundred feet. I don't remember the number, but it was not a detailed technical measurement. On the measurement of Hayden Row, when you'd given your presentation, you made comments about.
Yeah.
Survey, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, you said that the survey was done X number of feet, and you made a comment that it wasn't, wasn't sort of a normal survey where you did it. I think that was the word used, where you did it every X number of feet. So I thought that should be captured, that, that it wasn't,
Yeah,
I don't know what the words are. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but.
if you're gonna do a roadway profile, you'll do them every 50 feet. This was not a roadway
Right,
profile.
okay, so you
This
said, I
is
think you
just-
said every couple hundred or something.
Yeah, that was only to identify where the road edge of pavement is within the existing right of way.
Okay,
This is really a right of way property boundary.
okay, thanks. That was point number 1.
Sure.
And then point number 2, you made a comment that the roadway would need to be reconfigured if you were to basically straighten it and put a trail in, there'd be some reconfiguration. Again, I don't want to put words in your mouth,
Yeah.
but the note I made.
Like I just previously mentioned, the road, the center line of Hayden Row right now is not within the center line of the right of way. So it kind of meanders. To do any kind of project where you might think of requiring 50 to 55 feet of a right of way, to build the type of cross-section that was presented at the April open house, you'd have to move the center line of Hayden Road.
Right.
So that's, you kind of reconfigure, reconstruction, whatever term you want to use. You'd have to change the center line of Hayden Road, probably in several locations or possibly the entire road. Who knows? You'd have to go through and, again, do a proper survey to pick up existing conditions and other than just identifying where your right of way line is.
Yeah, thanks. So again, I couldn't even say that again, but those were the kind of the two headlines that I thought should be captured in the minutes. So I request that those be added, even paraphrased, I'd be happy with that.
I'm sure Elaine.
Well, we
captured them.
we do like you a lot. There was a motion on the table.
That's all right.
And that's why I
We
interrupted
we
you.
needed to, no, we needed to second the motion, then we could have the discussion.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know there was a.
That's all right. Do we have a quick second so we can have this discussion?
Yeah, did the minutes go out?
Somebody second my motion.
I second
to
it,
approve
okay? Now we can have a
Sorry, I didn't
discussion.
know. there was on that.
No, they were just hard copy, they weren't emailed out.
Did not see them before.
They came out before you were
That's what,
appointed, Jamie, so you missed it in the,
they weren't attached. to-
no, they were,
No, I was appointed before this meeting. I was at this meeting. I didn't get them.
2 meetings ago. They weren't sent out again, but they were sent out
That could be.
before the meeting where you didn't meet.
Oh, yeah, I didn't get that.
You know, Jane.
Can I be added to the list? Can I receive the minutes?
oh,
I
yeah,
think
The
they
next
go
time?
out, when Jane sends out the agenda, usually they go out with that.
Oh,
But they
okay,
did this
yeah,
time.
they
There's-
didn't.
Oh, they went out to the.
they
meeting
went before, the meeting before. And I'm sorry if you weren't.
This is
on there,
that meeting
Jamie.
that
Yeah, the abortive one, right.
My apologies, Jamie, that's on
Back on that.
That's on me, but now you have them, so we'll give Jamie a minute to read them.
She didn't vote on that.
she wasn't at the meeting.
You can read them now.
Oh, let's see.
No, she was,
She was
I mean, I
there.
can't vote anyway. I just,
Oh.
like, I took minutes and.
but you can provide feedback.
Yeah,
She most definitely can.
Right, feedback.
That part of the process, I guess I know.
Yeah, yep. So should we postpone, Jamie, do you want to take these home and read them? Should we hold off?
I can read them right now. I'm a
Okay.
fast reader. Thank you. And you can maybe skip to another thing, but.
That's the last
No,
one.
that's.
No,
last
that-
That's it?
Next
Oh,
thing
okay.
is the adjourning. We-
Yeah, then I can bring it back next time.
Okay, so we'll hold off.
Well, I just wanted, so for the open meeting law, you can't let them go too long. You have to approve the minutes, namely.
That's all right, so we'll take 2 minutes and let
Okay.
Jamie read through them. We'll have a moment of silent prayer for the world.
So are we okay on Scott's proposed amendment though, in the meantime?
Sure, is there further discussion on that? Well,
I'm
Jamie's
fine
reading.
with it.
No, I'm fine, I think,
But
I have no problem with
actually
that.
And paraphrase is fine.
Writes the verbiage is
Um,
all I'm asking. Or I'm just clerk.
well,
I think
Dave reiterated.
Realize that she doesn't have a vote on the minutes anyway.
Oh, I know, but she can add input if she wants to.
So I move,
So, Elaine, you feel comfortable with both, adding both Scott's
Both
and
meetings were
Dave's?
recorded.
Yep, both meetings are recorded.
it's good.
so I move that we accept the minutes,
I already did.
subject to the, two amendments in, section 3 that Scott cited.
Yep, and as soon as Jamie finishes,
Oh, he
we'll
was
be good.
doing section 3 of our earlier discussion.
No.
No,
It was on
it was on the minute.
Oh,
Section
what?
3 of the minutes.
I'm sorry, I thought you went back to this.
Not always off script.
That's why I said what I said. I thought you were talking about this.
So I know you
I know that.
had moved, but I moved something different, I guess. I don't know if that was exactly the right protocol.
I think we
Well,
caught it.
We all.
Got the gist of it, that you moved to approve the
What
minutes
you-
as
what the
amended,
Protocol would be, Eric, would you change your motion to include
the amendments. as
Scott's
discussed.
Yes.
amendments? And I will.
Oh, wow.
Now,
So very fortunate.
we need another,
Second.
another second.
10
Second.
seconds. And we'll wait to see if Jamie has some,
No, I'm fine.
okay, Jamie's
you.
all set.
That's your phone.
Yes, thank you. Trying to give it away.
Need a roll call.
Okay, we need a roll call vote. We'll start with Irfan.
I'm going to abstain because I didn't review it and I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay. Ken,
Aye.
Yes.
so you're, a
Aye,
yes,
aye,
Scott's a yes, Jane's a yes, Eric
Eric's a yes.
and Bob.
Yes.
Okay.
Now we gotta vote on the adjournment.
Now, I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second that.
Why am I surprised?
Somebody is.
All in favor? Start with the front.
Fine, yes.
Ken,
Aye to adjournment.
Eli,
Yes.
Scott, Jane, Jeff,
Yes, yes.
and Bob.
Yes.
Okay,
Good meeting, Jane.
good meeting, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
So